It's the West Tigers podcast, season number 7. It's a new season where hopefully primarily 2024 focused on this edition of the West Tigers podcast, and new intro as well. So a bit of a new sound heading into a whole new year. Refreshing things for episode number 291. And the West Tigers podcast, I know the guys are probably going to laugh a little bit about this, but it is, we should rename it and relabel it and rebrand it. It's the podcast that covers everything to do with Australia's most dysfunctional professional sporting organisation. I think that's a fair assumption. Steve, the last week, if we focus on the review and all of the circus that has been going on in regards to the review, I don't know about you, but I feel pretty much that what we've seen in the last week probably is an indication as to why we asked for the review in the first place. It's been very interesting, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. How are you, Joel? It's just the spin. The spin is in full motion, and it's sad. It's sad because Lee Hadjimantonis came out and said not long ago that he served at the pleasure of the board, and then the board asked him to step away. If he was serving at the pleasure of the board and he was a man of his word and of his merit, he would have stepped aside for the club that he proposes to love so much. But he hasn't. He's actually done the opposite. It's obvious that I don't know where it's coming from, but it's obvious that somewhere from within our organisation that they're contacting the media and trying to get the media on side with their point of view and pitting the media against the review. And it's and then within the board they're fighting amongst themselves now. So it's just typical of what you'd expect of the quality of leadership we've seen at this club for the last generation. And look, I will say, look, I'm still happy to wait for the review recommendations to come down before we start laying blame. But as I said a couple of pods ago, I'll just say it again, but this time probably with more force and more passion and more belief, that I am just fed up with the leadership of this club and us expecting to put up with the crap that they dish up week after week, and it just continues.
Yeah, well, I think, I don't know about you, but I feel 100% vindicated. I think that, as I said, this just shows once again why the club is dysfunctional, why the club's not going anywhere, and what's played out. I just thought it's just been complete amateur hour. And in terms of Lee, if joining the dots of that David Riccio piece and having a shot at us, which I thought was really unprofessional and disgusting. Like, you're not popularly elected, Lee. You're not there because we as supporters are backing you and saying that we want you as our chairman. It's just the circumstances with which you find yourself to be fortunate enough to be able to have that position. And I don't think you are understanding and representative of the fans, because I think we are not in favour of you as remaining as chairman of the West Tigers at this stage. If we join those dots, and personally, I think you should resign. Gary, the David Riccio piece, obviously, it was upsetting. It was disappointing, and it was, I guess, hard to take, given we haven't gone into this process with anything more than asking for us to finding the problems with the club so we can all better enjoy this club that we all are connected to. Disappointing is the word.
Yeah, I was quite disappointed in it. Not so much personally, but from the implication that the review team is setting this up as podcasters versus the CEO and the chairman. I don't think that's really what anyone here is doing. We've all we've participated in an interview with the review team. We've given our opinions on various areas of the club, but we did so with the knowledge that we're talking from the outside, looking into the club. We've given our opinions on certain topics, but I would expect more weight to be given to people who are actively professionally engaged with the club on a continual basis, and people inside the club I think a lot of that weight would be coming from. The reason why we asked for a review was to find out exactly what is wrong in our club. It wasn't necessarily to get a achieved outcome at the start of it. We all have our opinions on what's wrong at the club, and you've mentioned yours at the start of the show, Joel. But the idea of the review is no matter what my opinion is of what's happening in the club, no matter what your opinion is, no matter what Steve's and Declan's opinion is, that we have some professional people going to our club, some people who aren't part of our club, aren't employees of our club, and they have a look at our club and they determine what is wrong inside the West Tigers. I'm happy, as Steve said a moment ago, to wait for the outcomes of that review and that process to be had. What the weekend showed to me is that there are other people at our club, other people who are involved at high levels of our club, who aren't happy to wait for the outcome of this review. I think the Lee information about him being extended 2-3 weeks ago, it was now, just as the review was kicking off, was a sign that there's people in our club who aren't happy to wait to find out what the review turns up and what decisions and what recommendations are made from that. And the articles that came out late last week, the Riccio article being the key one, and the Chalmers article as well, shows me that there are people in our club who aren't happy to wait and listen to the recommendations of the review. Now, the review's been put in place by the Holman Barnes Group, and it appears that there's people on the West Tigers board, including our chairman, who aren't happy with that process and aren't happy to actually look at what it actually turns up. They've gone on the attack already. They've gone on the attack against the people doing the review. There was some allegations of bias because Gary Barnier is a Foundation 13 member. And there was allegations of the review being set up for its podcasters versus the CEO. I don't view it as that at all. I want what is wrong with our club found out in a professional manner, and I think that's what we have. I'm quite confident after meeting Gary Barnier that he's going to do a fair, thorough, unbiased, and comprehensive review of our club and come up with some key recommendations to set our club up moving forward into the future. And I'm happy to wait for those recommendations to come back, and then we'll see where the club is at. But as I said, I think there's people in our club who aren't happy to wait for that.
I think you're right. Well said, Gary. And Declan, hello to you. I'm going to throw out here that why are we not surprised that the last week's happened? Like, isn't this just classic West Tigers where it feels like, okay, review, the head honchos have put the review in, we've got a good team of two guys doing it, let's sit back, let's do the review, and a week later everything blows up, people are talking, it's being played out in the media. It's classic West Tigers.
Yeah, sorry, my voice, just listening to Gary, which is so breathtaking, it take away my voice, but I suppose when you just when you look at it, it's not surprising that, you know, if someone feels threatened, they're going to have a crack, and this is just, as everyone has said, probably some people who probably feel that the review might not fare too well for them having a crack back. We can obviously, it's more than likely that Lee is leaking this stuff to the media. I don't know that for a fact, but I think when you just connect the dots, it's pretty obvious. You would probably say that Justin Pascoe is in it as well. On I think it's 100% Footy, the podcast, where I think it was Michael Chammas and Michael Karianis, they pretty much confirmed that there was a lunch with a bunch of Daily Telegraph journalists with Justin Pascoe and Lee discussing the review. So if you just put the dots together, you can see that they probably allegedly leaked this stuff to the media to try and like paint their side of the picture. And that's just disappointing because we've talked about it before. If you thought you were doing a great job, then the review could validate you, and that could win you back some rope with fans. But it's just clear that, you know, that for some reason, I don't know why, they just don't see it that way, and they see it as a personal attack on them, which is just complete rubbish as well. Like, it's not something that's directed at anyone. I can confidently say that, and it's just disappointing that the club or the people, senior management of the club, has felt that they needed to go down this route.
One thing I'd like to mention as well, I want to talk about Gary Barnier and Tony Crawford for a little bit. There's been some arrows thrown in their direction, and I think some of them are unfair. I'd just like to go over their backgrounds a little bit. Gary Barnia has spent a long time in the aged care industry, running aged care facilities around the country. His current role, he goes in and reviews underperforming hospitals and hospital departments, does a review, gives recommendations. He's involved in the implementation of recommendations for those hospitals as well. In the past, he's done reviews of the healthcare system. He currently, that role in reviewing hospitals, he's a consultant for the New South Wales government in that role. So he has a lot of experience in actually conducting these sort of investigations into organisations. Not so much in the sporting world, but definitely in the aged care and healthcare systems. Now, you could argue that he's lacking a little bit in the sports administration side of it. But then you have Tony Crawford, who is a former CFO of the NRL. He spent about 6 years in that role at the NRL, so he has an idea of governance at that high level. He has also been, for a very short amount of time, he was a director on the board of the Newcastle Knights. So he has a little bit of experience working as part of a board for an NRL club. He's now on the board and an executive director of the North Sydney Bears, so at a level below the NRL, but he's still got that experience. And back earlier in his career, he spent 6 or 7 years as the CEO of the Australian Turf Club. So he has a wide range of experience in the sporting industry and in rugby league as well. He spent a long time at the NRL. And to say that these people don't have the necessary experience to be conducting this review, I think is wide of the mark. And you can't just look at one of them and say they don't have the experience. You've got to have a look at their combined experience to really see what I think is the benefit of having both Gary Barnia and Tony Crawford conducting the review into the West Tigers. Yeah,
to me it seems like a good mix, because if the way that people are carrying on, they'd either say this person's too much of an insider and is too much of a West Tigers person, or this person is too much of an outsider and doesn't understand the club. So I like it. It's a good mix. You've got one person that has an intrinsic idea of how the club works and is finding out more and more, and you've got somebody from outside the club that's able to look from the inside. So to me, it sounds really good. Steve, I want to talk to you about David Riccio. I'm sure that our listeners are aware of the piece. It really was, I think, a Get Square sort of piece that was fed to him by people. We have reached out. You reached out to David Riccio. We've asked him on the pod. We got no reply whatsoever. So he got into us and hasn't had the decency to reply. And I think that says a lot about you, David Riccio. And I think it says a lot about your journalistic integrity if you haven't given us the right of reply. Steve?
Yeah, well, I didn't think this was possible, but my opinion of him has sunk even lower. You know, after watching him and his clueless responses on 360 for most of the year, I can't believe that I actually have a lower opinion of him now than I did then. But the guy, yeah, I wrote with everyone's input a 9-point reply to his article. It was about a page and a half of A4 type print. So it was fairly detailed, and it refuted pretty much everything he said in that article. And he hasn't, as you just said, Joel, he just hasn't bothered to reply to it at all in any way, shape, or form. And so, David, if you're still up, mate, and you're listening, or you do get to listen to this, you're welcome to come onto the pod at any stage and discuss with us supporters from the Hill, us clueless supporters from the Hill, and we'd be happy to talk through that article with you point by point. And there's just a couple of things I do want to mention about it. One is the whole premise of the article is wrong, because he says that the review has been brought up to remove the chair and CEO. Now, that's fundamentally, categorically incorrect. The review was established to collect data on the governance of the West Tigers in a bid to determine areas for improvement. Now, if that leads to the CEO, for example, or the chair moving on because they are seen to be the problem in the club, then so be it. But it may not be. So the review in itself, and the petition that brought about the review was not put together to remove those two people. It was put together to find out what's wrong with the club. And the reason we had to do that was because for 12 years we've sat back and watched this club bumble and fumble its way through governance and operational management and do absolutely nothing to make us any better. Absolutely nothing. Now, the other thing that he said was that we were that we didn't have a clue. And that we were just supporters sitting on the hill. That's how he described us. Now, this is not about me. It's not about any individual. But I'm just going to say, all of us on this podcast have had close association, with the club for the last couple of years. We have actually had the opportunity to see the inner workings of the club to some degree. And what we've seen has not been pretty at any level. In fact, it's been scary, if I'm 100% honest. I won't go any further with that. But the other thing I want to say is that I've spent the last 20 years of my professional life working at governance level and senior operational level in schools. And I've worked with boards that are incredibly high-powered individuals and had to navigate my way through that process, successfully sometimes, not successfully others. But through all that, I learned a lot about governance, operation and senior management. And so I'm going to say straight out, I'm not a fan sitting on the hill. I know what I'm talking about. And when I look at West Tigers, I see a club that is extremely poorly governed and managed. And I say that through experience. Now, to David Riccio, I'm not sure what experience you've had, David, in your life. I don't know if you've sat on boards. I don't know if you've spent night after night in boardrooms trying to work through governance issues with organisations like I have. But I would suggest that I'm probably in a better place than you, David, right, to give comment on the West Tigers. Yes, we are passionate about it because we love this club, but we are also knowledgeable about what we're talking about. And the reason we've had to do it is because the clowns that run the show haven't done it. And that's the truth of the matter. And again, David, you're welcome to jump on here and discuss that with any of us.
The other point I do want to raise is Steve just spoke about that we didn't set this up in an effort to remove certain people from the club, namely the chair and the CEO. From meeting Gary Barnier, neither has the review team. I don't think the review team from the meeting that I sat in had any preconceived ideas. In fact, I think they were probably looking in other areas first that could be a possibility. Now, I don't know whether it is a possibility. I don't know if that's going to be as part of the recommendations. But I do know Gary Barnier, at least, and I will assume Tony Crawford for extension on that, do not have a predetermined outcome before they started their review process.
Yeah, and it's entirely discourteous to suggest that us and those other two people were angling for anything in particular, because what's the point of having a review if we were just looking to a predetermined outcome? We don't know what the actual answer is. The whole idea of the review is to find those answers, Gary.
And if we didn't want someone to go in and find out what truly is wrong with the club, the petition wouldn't have been to have an external review done of the club. The petition would have been to remove Justin Pascoe and Lee Hadjimentelis. That wasn't our petition. Correct. And there's a reason that wasn't our petition, because we want to know. As I said earlier, we all have our ideas about what we think is wrong in the club, but we want to know what's wrong in the club. We don't want to be going off what we're seeing from the outside looking in. We want the actual facts of what is wrong with the club, and we want the Holman Barnes Group to then act on those recommendations that come from facts, not from clueless fans, as David Riccio said, who sit on the hill. I don't want the decision to remove people at our club based on my interactions with the club. I want the true information found out. I want evidence provided, not just from guys like Steve and yourself, Joel. I want evidence from what's actually occurring in our club before we get to the point where people are being removed from our club. I want to know that that's the problem. We have one chance to set our club up for possibly the next 20 to 30 years, and that needs to be based on evidence and proper evidence, which is why the review was so important to be done, and why I don't personally believe that a lot of the weight should be placed on what we've seen, though it's important, but there needs to be more evidence than just what we have seen from our interactions with the club. It has to be everyone that's dealing with the club, and that's why the review team's speaking to the media, that's why they're speaking to fans, that's why they're speaking to employees of the club, that's why they're speaking to former players who have interactions with the club, it's why they're speaking to other podcasters and other media types. It's to get a well-rounded picture of what is occurring in the club so the right decisions can be made and the right recommendations can be put in place to set this club up for the strong future that we all deserve our club to have.
Well, what annoys me is the inference is that we are amateurs, and yeah, to a degree we are, but we aren't as people. We are all professional people in our fields, and we come from a diverse range of fields and work as professionals. And I think that the amateurish behaviour and the amateurish standard is not being set by the West Tigers podcast. It's the exact reason why we're having a review is because of years of amateurish performance from certain people in the organisation. Declan, I'll come to you first and then over to you, Steve.
I mean, yeah, this whole notion that, do you have to have some sort of license to have an opinion on footy? How is Dave Riccio any different to...
I'll get you one, Declan. I'll give you a test and we'll see if you're allowed to have an opinion.
Yeah, but do you go to Service New South Wales and do you have to do a test and then, pay a radio? What's the deal? Why is, just because he works at NRL 360 or he's employed by News Corp, why does he have a right to an opinion any more than we do? I think it's just crazy. And he never played either. So if it came from someone like Braith Anasta or Gordon Tallis, you could say, oh, that makes sense because they played the game, they won premierships, they saw the inside workings of a successful operation. But these journalists, I don't get it. I don't know why Dave Riccio would say something like that. And I think that's the most disappointing thing that he, as Steve alluded to, he just completely showed the review in a way that it just isn't in reality. None of us have come out and said we want X done, we want this done. It's just a review to see what the problems of the club are, to then take affirmative action, and then to not even give journalistic reply, I think was also pretty ordinary.
Yeah, one other point I'd like to mention is that it was stated that Benji Marshall is furious, apparently, and that's good. I actually don't know if that's true because there's no quote. There's no quote there. It's just a statement, throwaway line, basically. But if Benji Marshall is furious, I think that's good because we need someone within the club to be really, really angry with where we are at. But the point I'd make is I hope that Benji Marshall is not angry with the fans for feeling the way we feel. I hope he's angry with the people that have led to or caused the fans to feel the way we feel right now, because we're only reacting to incompetence. That's basically what we're doing. We're reacting to years and years of failure on and off the field. And it just took one match, one lit match, lit by us, to ignite an inferno. That's all it took. And the inferno is blowing in the same, everyone is pretty much blowing in the same direction. We're all saying the same thing, right? The people are sick of it. And people have talked about it at games and talked about it on socials and talked about it amongst themselves for years now. And it's just got worse and worse and worse. And it just took one small idea to have this petition asking for a review to absolutely unite our fan base, all to say the same thing. So, I hope David Riccio is right in that Benji Marshall is really angry. And I hope that Benji Marshall is angry at the right people.
Well, exactly. Well said, Steve. And if that story was fed to Riccio by the chairman, it's completely discourteous, not just to us, but it's discourteous to every West Tigers fan out there. And I keep reading on the socials people saying, do not renew my membership. I'm not going to do the auto-renew. I'm not going to rejoin. The anger that's out there and the frustration, it goes well beyond us. And it's something to keep in mind because, as I said before, I don't think the support is there for the chairman and the way that he is conducting himself over the last couple of weeks. So we need to let the review run its course, and what the review finds is what the review finds, and hopefully all the books are open. We can have a look, to a degree. Obviously, we're not going to see everything, but we see the key recommendations, and the club takes action on it. And I think that any action, or not any action, but a lot of potential action that could happen is probably very, very vindicated by some of the behaviour that we've seen over the last week, which is certainly not professional and certainly not in the best interests of the club that we all profess to care about. And I know that that's where we're coming from, is that we want the club to be better. We want the club to be better across all aspects of the organisation. And it feels as though the people that are drawing a wage or are in positions of power at the club may be more interested in self-preservation than the actual club itself. And that's the difference. We'll be here long after they're gone. So should we move on? Is that enough? I think that's enough of that topic. It's disappointing.
Very.
Very. What about the news, getting back onto the football field? We haven't talked football for a little while, but Stafford Toa, Declan, another 2 years. November, now going to be contracted till 2026. Do you think it was a necessary move to give him those other 2 years? It seems a little odd to me, given I don't know how sought after Stafford Toa would be, with all due respect.
I think he would have gotten reasonable traction on the open market. It's a tough one as well because we don't really know how much you're re-signing for. But if we're just talking about the re-signing, I'm pretty happy because if we're doing a team 1 to 17 next week for next year, then he would definitely be in my 13, starting at one of the centre spots. I think that yes, he's not probably consistent enough to the point where you'd be happy for him to be picked all the time in that position. But I think he's got great promise, and I think this season he did show signs of more consistency. I mean, he had that great game against the Cowboys where he looked like the best player in the game, but that did fade away. But yeah, I'm happy with it considering what's available on the market and what we have in the squad. I think it's a no-brainer to re-sign him.
Gary, the Noffa situation is, you never want him. We've discussed this a couple of months ago. You never really want him to be comfortable. You want him to sign short-term contracts. I would have given Toa another year, but another 2 years to me seems odd.
Yeah, the thing for me is I thought he had a really good period of football. That period where we won a few games, that 5 to 6 weeks, where we won the majority of our games this season, I thought he was playing really good football. The highlight was the game against the Cowboys, where he absolutely towed up Holmes. I thought that was his strongest period. The problem is he doesn't play consistently at that level, and I think there's too much of a range between that top football and that lower tier football. Now, this year was a big improvement. What I thought was his biggest improvement this year is I thought he was much better in defence. I thought he got caught out a lot less this year than he has in seasons past. But I need to see a little bit more consistency before I'm probably extending that second year. I do agree with you, Joel. I would have probably extended him one, tied him up so he couldn't negotiate come November 1. But I think he needs to show a little bit more consistency and show he's still only a young guy that he can perform at that top level for a longer period of time than what we saw this season.
Steve, we're not going to open the Pandora's box talking about the former halfback / 5'8" that was with the West Tigers for 11 years, but talking about the halves as we've done to death through 2023. But we look at 24, there's a bit more quality there potentially, hopefully, if that's how you feel, or potential quality. Jaden Sullivan, Latu Fainu, Aiden Seaso. I'm being very careful with my words. I'm not comparing and contrasting. But we talk about guys like Stafford Toa. I mean, there may be the opportunity with a little more creativity, a little bit more synchronicity going on in the halves. that we may, if I do the counterpoint to my earlier point about Stafford, that there could be the opportunity that he could consistently rise to that next level if he's given more opportunity with the ball, etc.
Yeah, I agree with what Gary said. Defensively, he's shown that he's got it defensively. I think he's also shown that when he gets a little bit of space and a little bit of time, he's extremely damaging with the football. He can definitely beat a man. He can beat a man inside and outside. He's capable. I would suggest, and it's just a guess, obviously, but I would suggest that the Benji Marshall has seen that in him and believes that he can get that out of him on a more consistent level and sees him as part of the future. But it is interesting because I don't know what Benji thinks of Brett Naden, for example, but I'd still have Naden ahead of Stafford Toa at this stage. And if the rumours are true about Bradman Best, then you're starting to talk depth positions in the centre, which would be nice because we've struggled. But like Bradman Best would be a nice acquisition, that's for sure. But my personal opinion, I like Stafford Toa. I like what he has shown, but I agree with what Gary said also. He needs to show it much more consistently.
And you're definitely right about his ability to beat a man this year. I thought that improved greatly as well. There was that during that period of football he was very difficult to bring down by the first guy. Not just beating a man inside and outside, but he was busting tackles as well. So if he can play at that level consistently, then I think it's a really good signing. But he's got to play at that level consistently, and he hasn't shown that he can do that yet.
I think another thing to flag with this signing is that Stafford Toa, he's only 23 and he's played 60 games in first grade. So he's in that nice little sweet spot where he's probably had a lot of the growing pains that you see with a lot of these young players when they hit between the 10 to 50 games. And I think there's still a lot of upside. He's still quite young. So I think in terms of his progression, you would expect him to take a big jump next year as he reaches towards that 100-game cap matches played. So I think from that perspective, I think it was important to re-sign him because we're going to have a lot of guys in the squad who are from that 0 to 50 cap range, in terms of youth. So I quite like the signing because it's someone that we've kind of persevered with, because when he left the Knights, I think there was a lot of question marks that he was even a first grader. So I think it's important to stick with him in his development, and hopefully the money isn't too much that, if he doesn't end up in the team, if we manage to sign someone like Bradman Best or someone of that calibre, we don't feel the pressure because he's playing in reserve grade and he's on a massive wicket.
Yeah, sorry, Joel. I just wanted to mention that I decided to totally ignore your savage rebuke of Luke Brooks. That's fine.
You mean the Manly 5'8"?
The Manly 5'8", yeah.
That sounds good to say. Centres in the mix next year: Tristan Riley, Josh Falidi, Junior Tupu. A lot of people were saying Junior Tupu potentially a centre candidate, and Brent Naden as well. So fascinating. We've mentioned Bradman Best. The reports say $800,000 per season. Are you kidding me? $800,000, Gary, for a centre, not a spine player, and it's Bradman Best? Surely, hopefully, this can't be true, surely.
I wouldn't like to be going that high. They're talking, the reports were that we're going to make him the highest paid centre in the game. I think he's a fabulous footballer, but 800,000's pushing it a little bit for me. I'd like to get him across to the club, but probably not at that price.
Yeah, I think if you just look at the most successful team in the competition, it's Penrith, and they've the way they work their salary cap is, they've obviously prioritised spine players, some middle players, and then one outside back in Toa who does who starts to set stuff really well. And they had Stephen Crichton, one of the best centres in the game, and they just let him go because they identified that, yes, he's a great centre, but there's other positions in the modern game that are more important, such as your spine players and your middle forwards, to gather that momentum to make these centres look good. So I think, although we desperately need centres or to strengthen that centre spot, it does worry me a little bit that they're doing the kind of opposite as to what the successful teams in the competition do. And you look at the Broncos as well; they've let Harvey Farnsworth go to the Dolphins as well. He was crucial to the Premiership team, but he's just not a spine player, and you just can't afford to be paying your non-spine players big money like that.
For most of the history of rugby league, a centre has been more important than a winger. That's reversed over the last 15 years or so. The amount of work wingers do getting your sets off to good starts, the centre just isn't. Now, I played centre. I played a lot of centre as a footballer, but that centre position doesn't have the importance that it used to. It used to be one of the most crucial positions on the field, and disappointingly for me, it just doesn't have that importance that it used to have.
Look, I don't disagree with what either of you guys just said. But you both made a lot of sense. And like your point, Declan, was spot on, right? Though I just will throw in, something to counter it. Is that we've talked about this all season and we've watched it. We just don't beat it. We just don't beat a man. We just do not create numbers. We don't get into attacking position. Now we can say, yeah, it's our 7 and 6, and they were dysfunctional, and that's true and it's correct. But our attacking structures weren't capable of creating space or creating numbers at any time at all throughout the year. And so if you're saying to me, well, we're going to pay overs to bring in a player of Bradman Best's quality who is going to improve us from an attacking perspective, yeah, 800's too much. I agree with that. But I don't mind paying overs because, again, you're right, Declan, we should be modelling ourselves on the best. That's 100% correct. But we've come last twice in a row, and we've got to get players to the club somehow. And if we have to play overs to get a guy like him, who's going to make a huge difference to our attacking flair, then I think we probably have to do it.
Steve, it was our 7 and 6. That's it.
That was all.
It's not just a 7 and 6, mate. It's not just you're right. But I don't know whether it's going to be much different next year. You're telling me we're going to bring someone, a state of origin quality player, into the club, and if we have a 7 and 6 that are better, that are going to give our outside men more time with the ball and more space, and giving them the ball in better positions on the football field, then I'm going to play overs for a Bradman Best. Of course you are. We
need to upgrade in the centre. There's no doubt about it.
Well, Bradman Best does that. He's an upgrade.
Not at 800,000.
Well, I said that. I said I wouldn't pay $800,000 for him, but I'd pay overs for him. Now I don't know what a standard centre gets. I don't know. Is it 500? Would that be right? Would 500 be around the mark? So if we're paying $650 for him, I'd be happy with that.
So the rumours that the Knights are offering him around the 700 mark, and this has obviously been inflated by his Origin performance in Game 3. I think before that, and also the Knights' end of season form. I think before that, I think you'd be probably pushing to ask for 800K, but I think his form probably has pushed up his price tag. And I would definitely take Bradman Best. Like, if we ended up signing him for 800K, you wouldn't really hear me whinge that much because, as you said, Steve, at some point you just got to sign players, and if it's slightly over, if you do it for one or two players, you can handle that if the rest of your cap's in good shape, which apparently it is, or that's what we've been told for the last 3 years. So if we did sign Bradman Best, I wouldn't be sad, but I just think that I could so easily see us having a Ferrari like him on an edge, but we just never get him the ball as well. I could easily see that happening. We don't really have someone like a Kalen Ponga to make him look great at the moment. Maybe Bula or Fainu or Sullivan will turn into that eventually, but it is a bit of a risk. That's why I would rather us, throw crazy money at someone like Jerome Luai for Penrith. Maybe offer him someone sorry, Joe's shaking his head, but I would do it. Someone 1.3, because he's a senior half in his prime and he can get our outside backs good ball because he's the one who distributes it. So I think if I was to go crazy overs for someone, I'd prefer it to be a Stein player, is my point, and I think I'm trying to make.
To not burst bubbles, and I'll come to you in a second, Gary, I wanted to make one quick point. So long as your prop rotation is Stefano, David Klemmer and Alex Twal, we're spinning our wheels. Gary?
Yeah, we definitely need that impact prop we've been talking about for a long time. I don't see that coming anywhere on the horizon still. But in regards to that 800,000, yes, it's great to pay overs. But looking forward, I do believe we're in a better position in the halves next year than we were this year. But there is still a lot of question marks over what the future of our halves look like. Aiden sees as a 1 year, maybe 2 year proposition, with the contract he's signing at his age. We're relying on Latu Fainu and Jaden Sullivan to take their games to a new level. Fainu's a young guy coming through the grades, hasn't played first grade yet. So he's still got to develop into that consistent first grader that all reports look like he's going to. And Jaden Sullivan, while still a young guy, hasn't cemented a spot in the halves at the Dragons this season. So there's still a lot of question marks around our halves, and I'd hate to see us in a position where we've gone out and we've spent $800,000 on Bradman Best, and then we find we've still got some issues in the halves because the halves are still unresolved. Now, I'm probably not going to go and spend the $1.3 million on Jerome Luai that Declan wants to spend, but there are question marks over our halves, and it is quite possibly another area where we're still going to have to spend money. And then you've got the impact prop that we're still lacking as well. So there's still a number of areas in our roster that we need to look at. And I think they need to be sorted out before we're spending $800,000 or even that $700,000 to $800,000 on Bradman Best.
Yeah, and there's also the issue of experience too, and bringing experience into the squad. And if you look at having, say, Sullivan or Fainu, like we're gathering Caesar's going to be there, but say you've got Sullivan or Fainu, and then outside him you've got Buller at the back who's inexperienced. You've got maybe Toa. You've maybe got Kapoa there. You maybe got Tupu. You're talking about a back line that is extremely inexperienced, and so therefore, all of a sudden, you got David Nofaluma, but I'm not sure what he adds. But if you then bring in someone like Bradman Best, all of a sudden you've got a much more experienced player helping mentor these young kids around them. And out on the football field, in the heat of battle when it's tough, having a guy of that experience is going to help these young guys without a doubt.
I mean, it really depends on if they really nail Latu Fainu and Sullivan. Like, if those guys at the end of next year, they'll be the halves for the next 5 years, and they're locked down on 4-year contracts, pretty reasonable money for halves, good halves at least, then you say, maybe we can, spend some money on centre, a little bit more than you traditionally would like to, because we've got these other guys that are discounted. So that could make sense, to me. But I just think that, Caesar, I think there's going to be lots of question marks over him. He hasn't played in the NRL for quite a while. And if he doesn't work out or fill a gap, I think, in the middle of next season, I think we could be seriously still having this conversation about needing another senior half. And I'm just worried that if we sign someone like Bradman Best on overs, that could make it that much a little bit harder to get a senior half who still has something to contribute to the NRL.
Yeah, hold on to that checkbook, West Tigers. Don't splash it around too quickly. Alex Conti, Declan, I'll throw straight back to you. You're the go-to man when it comes to young players. Plenty of raps on him, but by the look of it, on his way to the Bulldogs. Should we be disappointed by this? Is it a blow?
Yeah, I think it's a blow in the sense that he has a really good young player. I think he's got first grade potential. I think that's for sure. He's a dual player, so he has that union background. I think he goes to St Patrick's Strathfield, so he's got that rugby union background, and he's a good league player. He's a bit of a small halfback at the moment. To play in a row, I think he's going to have to put some size on, but I think he's got all the assets to make a good number 7 in the NRL. So I think the Bulldogs have got a good one there. But what I will say is, I think with development and retaining juniors, I think you've just got to identify the ones you want to keep, and then if you lose others, you lose others, because not everyone can come into the top 30. It's been reported that was what the Bulldogs offered him to get him over the line as well, that he would be going to the top 30. I'm not sure when, and he would also train first grade. And we've got Fainu coming in on a 4-year deal, Lachlan Galvin, best schoolboy in the schoolboy competition, 3-year deal coming into the first grade team, and then we've also got Sullivan, Antonio Large as well, even though he's a little bit younger. So we've got a lot of good young halves coming in or around the system at the moment. And I would probably put Conti a little bit towards the bottom of that list if I was to power rank all of our good young halves. So, he's a great young player. I hope he does really well at the Bulldogs, but you just can't keep them all. I mean, if you look at Sean Bloor at Penrith, like he was the captain of every single rep team you could possibly make. But Penrith just decided that like we have to prioritise other people to keep, so you let them go to us. And I think that's just the thing about juniors is you just got to identify who you want to keep and then hope that your development and your identification of talent is accurate. And these are the people that will be playing for you in first grade. So like, he could turn out to be a superstar, and then we're looking back at this day and thinking, why did we let him go? But I think they've identified that someone like Lachlan Galvin probably has more first grade potential, or someone like Ladu Fainu. And I think that's the reason why they let him go. And plus, it's always good to have one less Braithen Astor client at the club as well. So there's one silver lining. But yeah, I wish him the best. I think he's a good player. But I think we've got a few people that are just a little bit closer to the first grade at the moment.
Yeah, I think Declan just about covered all the points I wanted to say anyway. But to me, he's kind of just stuck in that middle. He's got his pathway kind of blocked at the moment because he's got both Latu Fainu and Jaden Sullivan sitting in front of him. He's got Galvin as well, who has good raps on him. A lot of those younger guys are considered some of the best halves in their age group, and I think he's just that level below that. And then below him, he's got another young gun, as Declan said, in Large coming through. So he's kind of in that middle, and if I was him sitting there and you look at the decisions the club's making by bringing young halves around him, then I can see why he would look somewhere else because that pathway's blocked, and then he's got a young guy who's nipping at his heels coming behind him as well. And Large has that bigger raps over him. It's probably not going to be that long before he's kind of jumping him in that pecking order over the next 2 to 3 years. And his kind of opportunity to make a first grade spot his own at the West Tigers gets very, very small very quickly when you have a look at that. So I can see why, and not just the West Tigers' sake that he's moving to the Bulldogs, but I can see why for his decision, especially if he's going into a top 30 spot, going to the Bulldogs would be a fair bit more attractive than staying at the West Tigers.
All right, good analysis, guys. Thank you. Paints the picture a little bit more for us, gives us a little bit of relief, I think, by the sound of it. Let's talk home grounds. The announcement, of course, Campbelltown and Leichhardt in 2024. But the potentiality, Steve, of a stadium at Liverpool, like I understand that does make sense from a geographical perspective, but the report saying that this is only 20,000 seats, what's that to me doesn't sound like that's going to tick the boxes. It's too small.
Yeah, well, it's larger than Leichhardt and Campbelltown at the moment. But yeah, it is. But this one just won't go away. So there's part of me that thinks this story has just been thrown out there to take away our concentration on what's happening around the review. But there's another part of me that thinks that there's some legs to this because it'd be at least a year and a half ago that I got a tip from an ex-sponsor that this Liverpool thing had legs. And I remember at the time I actually asked Justin Pascoe quite innocently, I said, is that, and he said straight out no. He said absolutely not. It's not even in our thinking. And I didn't think much more about it, to be honest. But this Liverpool one just won't seem to go away. I'm tend to leaning towards it's a bit of a furphy to divert our attention. But yeah, but your point's right, Joe. If they're going to build a stadium out there, it should be bigger than 20,000.
It's the equivalent of on a federal level when we need a distraction. Let's talk high-speed rail. You can get from Sydney to Brisbane in 3 hours. Let's start talking about that, and it never ever happens. Gary, geographically, it's about the same distance from your house to Liverpool as it is from my house to Liverpool. It would work for me. It would solve the issues around, it's right smack bang in the middle of the inner west and Campbelltown. It sort of serves both. But what's your feeling about Liverpool? To me, it feels like it's not a West Tigers area. There's no heritage. It's a kind of restart. It seems like a scary prospect to me.
Well, there are arguments you can make for Liverpool. Liverpool is part of the MacArthur Rugby League district. There's sides that play out of Liverpool that play down in the Campbelltown competition. So geographically, it is right on the edge of one of our areas. It's right on the boundary with the Bulldogs. There's sides in Liverpool that play in the Bulldogs junior leagues as well. But for me, I find it a little confusing that we're making that this is coming out about Liverpool when we've just announced that we're going back to Campbelltown and Leichhardt. I would think as a club, if that's the direction we're going, which it seems to be, then why would we be having discussions about Liverpool at that time and kind of watering down that we're going back to our home grounds approach that the club is on? Whether you agree with that or not, that's a strange thing to be doing and to have out in the media that we're looking at Liverpool. To me, I think if we're looking at making Campbelltown and Leichhardt as our home grounds moving forward, then something has to be done about Campbelltown Stadium. Campbelltown Stadium's the area we should be talking about having upgrade. There's a lot of room there. I think it's the perfect place for a stadium. So if our focus is to make Campbelltown and Leichhardt and go home as they're promoting it, then we shouldn't be having these discussions in the media that we're looking at Liverpool. We should be putting all our efforts behind getting Campbelltown Stadium upgraded and not confusing the narrative by bringing up Liverpool.
So, Gary, you just said you were a little surprised that our club put forward a plan of moving forward with the stadiums in cementing in Leichhardt and Campbelltown, and then not a month later there's a possible change of direction. And you're saying you were surprised at that? Really?
Well, it is what our club tends to do all the time, and it's really disappointing that we're doing it once again. And as I've said many times on this pod, my biggest concern with the club at the moment is its inability to stick to a direction, and we're flopping and changing from what we're planning to do. And yes, this is just evidence of us doing that again, which to me is really disappointing once again. And what it does is you're trying to build up people to go to Campbelltown Stadium, and you're trying to build up that region. But with this coming into the media now, you're telling the people down at Campbelltown, hey, we might not be here for very long. So what incentive is there for the people of the Macarthur region to get out to Campbelltown Stadium next year to watch a side that, based on the last 2 years' form, is going to be playing really poorly? Because you're already talking to the suburb up the road about taking your games there. It doesn't make that move seem to that Macarthur district that you're really taking that move seriously.
And look, and I just state, please, this is not a West Balmain thing, okay? But with this decision to do the Leichhardt Campbelltown split, I don't know. I'm not sure. You guys might know what say. I think the clubs get to recommend or put to the NRL what they'd like, what games they'd like at what venues and that sort of thing. But they really, really need to think carefully about what games, especially they put at Campbelltown, because until I moved away, I'd go to Campbelltown and Leichhardt to every game, right? And there is something missing from Campbelltown. And again, I'm not saying that from a Balmain Magpies perspective. I'm just saying that there's something missing from the atmosphere, the feel of the place, and maybe it's the time slot, maybe it's the opposition. I don't know, but they really have to think how to make Campbelltown work.
Prime example, I think it was one of the first games this year, was a 6 p.m. Friday night game against the Warriors. Now, that is just set up for failure. There is no, with a widespread fan base that we do have, getting out to Campbelltown for 6 p.m. is hard enough, and then you put it against the only side from another country. It's just poor planning. But the club does not get a lot of say in that. They are allowed to put in requests for what they want, but putting in a big list of requests for exactly what games you want at Campbelltown and when you want them played is highly unlikely to eventuate. And I don't think they get much say in the days at all. So it's really disappointing that some of the games we do get down at Campbelltown are unattractive games. But hopefully the NRL has a look at that and sees that we're taking 5 games back there. and hopefully they help out by games against Canberra. A Canberra game is perfect to have at Campbelltown because it's their closest away game. I know it's still a fair way to Canberra, but it's the easiest away game for them to travel to. So hopefully the NRL is smart about what teams it puts down at Campbelltown.
I mean, yeah, just to build on Gary's point as well, I don't think it's just time slot. I think it's just event as well. I mean, if you look at the past few games that have been taken to Campbelltown, I remember we did an ambush event, and then I think we played Manly, and it was the week after Michael Maguire got sacked, and there was just the atmosphere around the general fan base was just terrible because we just sacked a coach. It wasn't looking great, and then we just absolutely got pumped by Manly. And I can't think of a big game that we've taken to Campbelltown that would get people to come and get around the team, because the team's been awful for the last 2 years, and there's none of those grudge matches either. Those Western Sydney grudge matches that go to Campbell that maybe could get a crowd at Campbelltown. So I understand that the point about atmosphere, but I also don't think that they've been given that sort of opportunity to build any sort of momentum in that area for obviously a variety of reasons. Some the club doesn't really have control of, but some that they do in terms of the quality that they put on the field every week. I think that if we had a genuinely good team, I think that you would see improvement in those numbers at Campbelltown.
And I'm hoping this year, now that there's 5 games and not 3 games, and that some of those really high quality games won't be going to CommBank and won't be going to ANZ as they have in the past, or the Sydney Football Stadium as they have in the past, that some of those quality games will be down there and will start to draw some people. Hopefully next year we have some quality games. Hopefully towards the end of the season we're still in the running for a top 8 spot, and we're able to generate a little bit of buzz and a little bit of a desire and a little bit of a need to get out to games because the team's performing well and is making a run at the semi-finals. Wouldn't that be nice?
It would be very nice. We can only dream. And knowing West Tigers, Australia's most dysfunctional professional sporting organisation, the stadium will be built in Liverpool. We will say lock, stock and barrel, we're moving to Liverpool. 6 months later, we'll change our mind. We're going to play 3 games at Liverpool. The Bulldogs will move in. They'll make it their home, and we'll continue to be the nomads of rugby league and continue to spin our wheels. Hey, maybe not. We can dare to dream there as well. I'm feeling very negative. On a more positive, light-hearted note, there seems to be a little bit of a coincidence that Eddie's gone missing just as the review kicked off. Gary, do you think he's staying out of the spotlight because he's afraid that maybe he is actually to blame for our woes?
Look, he may be to blame, but my theory is there was no Justin Pascoe at the grand final luncheon, there was no Lee Hadjiman-Tallis at the grand final luncheon, and now there's no Eddie on the pod for the last couple of weeks. So I know Justin Pascoe is in Vietnam. Maybe Eddie's in Vietnam with Justin Pascoe, and that's why he's been just as missing as some of the other guys.
Yeah, I think that Eddie said on the group chat that he wasn't going to come back on the pod till January, and I thought that was a joke, but just based on his current attendance rate, it might actually be the truth.
As long as he didn't swear he's not going to come on the pod until the West Tigers are a winning organisation. We may never see Eddie again. Steve.
I think you guys are all way off the mark. The pod's been fairly highbrow the last few weeks. We've been using words of more than 2 syllables, and it's just out of Eddie's pay grade. That's what I reckon.
Is it out of his pay grade, or you're saying he's not able to keep up with the conversation?
Well, one or 2 or both. 2 things can be right at the same time.
It's true, exactly. If you see if Eddie's not in Vietnam and you see him somewhere around the inner west, can you tell him we're looking for him and for him to come back? That'd be good.
He might be on his way to India after the Australian team's effort last night. He could probably take a spot in the top 6, I reckon.
Might be opening, yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. All right, guys, we will no doubt come back together in another week when another truckload of West Tigers news and disasters and stuff gets dropped off, and we'll have plenty to talk about, even though it is the off-season and the lull of the off-season, allegedly. But there's always plenty to talk about with this club that we've all voluntarily chosen to support for some strange reason. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, boys.
Thanks, guys.